Hey, everybody, this is Nathaniel Provencio here again with my great friend, Dr. Worster.
Hey, everybody.
Mhm.
And in the house, I've got an amazing community connection, a good, Nate, I'd like to call you a friend. I know
That's right.
we
Absolutely.
don't hang out very much, but a friend that I first met at a Solution Tree event like onboarding years ago. And then I later learned that Nate was this outstanding principal who turned a school around, became a model PLC school, one of
Mhm.
the winners of the DeFore International Schools of the Year. Nate, both you and I both share
That's
that
awesome.
distinction. And you used to teach in Manassas Park. We're both like 15, 20 minutes from MP,
That's great.
all the way from Louisville. Is it Louisville? Louisville? I
Say it
don't
right.
even know
Say
how
it
to
right.
say it. Yeah. Nate Meyer. What's going on, man?
Well, first of all, it's Louisville. If you could try to get it down to one syllable, you're pronouncing it, yeah. So just lull, like one
Louisville.
syllable, and then you're getting close to getting it right. But I thank you for this invitation, and I look forward to the conversation. But yeah, I began my career in Illinois. That's where I'm originally from.
Yeah.
But yes, I spent 3 years as a teacher in Manassas Park, a little city school district, and had a fabulous learning experience there. So yeah, not too far from where you are,
Mm-hmm.
and
Yep.
my experience there in Manassas Park really shaped my career. So I'm very blessed to have taught there and learned there. And I think there is a connection because I got my master's degree in from George Mason in curriculum and instruction.
Yep.
Like
Yeah.
you, all right. So are we all George Mason alums here?
We're
Yep.
all we're all patriots, man.
We're
We're all
all
patriots.
all right. Fantastic.
So, all right, Nate, I gotta figure this out. So, born in Illinois, how the hell did you get to Manassas Park and then you get to Louisville? I mean, that's quite the journey, and I think there's a story there. So, tell us about this sojourn all over the place.
So I knew really from a young age I wanted to be an educator. My mom was a kindergarten teacher. My older brother has been a 30-year classroom English teacher. So we've had educators in our family, and I knew that's what I wanted to be. And I remember doing clinicals. My wife and I, who we met at college, and she's an outstanding reading interventionist, and we did our clinicals, and one of the clinicals was in Peoria, Illinois, and I got to visit a school that we would say a truly disadvantaged middle school there.
Mm,
And it was like when I went to that clinical and opened the door, I felt like I was at home.
mm,
And it was, and I came from a more rural background, smaller schools. And when I went into those classrooms in Peoria, I thought this is really for me. This is where I feel comfortable. So I spent time actually as an alternative school teacher for my first few years in
mm.
Illinois. Great experience of seeing the assets in the kids I worked with there. And then my wife and I had an opportunity to leave Central Illinois and go to Manassas Park. The superintendent there, his name is Tom DeBolt, and he was
Mm,
just an outstanding mentor. But he was a Eureka College graduate,
mm.
and on a recruiting visit, um, and he convinced my wife and I to move out there, and we learned so much from that experience about as teachers putting us in leadership positions within the school, and learn how important that is. It was my first time working with multilingual learners, and that was a brand new learning experience for me. We had 3 great years out there, and then we decided to move back across the Appalachian Mountains. My father's side of the family was from Louisville,
Mm.
and I knew I wanted to stay and work in an urban environment. And so 20 years later, we're still here. We're still in Louisville, and enjoying our time here and working in our school district.
So
That's
what's
fascinating. That's fascinating.
what's your current position?
Currently, I'm an assistant superintendent for Jefferson County Public Schools. I'm the assistant superintendent of what we call the accelerated improvement schools. And I work with 34 schools, elementary, middle, and high. These are all schools that have been historically low performing schools. All of the schools that we work with at some point in the last 4 years or so have fallen in or out of CSI. So performing at the bottom 5% of the state. And so we work with our 34 schools on a turnaround model, but then turnaround then to stability. And that is our goal within the work. And as our office, we function just like a professional learning community. So as we're thinking about the PLC work, it's far more than just teachers working together. It's how schools operate. It's how central office should operate, and how we think and approach our jobs.
Man, that's huge. 34 schools, accelerated improvement track. I mean, that's the job of an entire superintendent. I know superintendents that have like one school. And here you are with 34 schools, man, and then it's like a huge, 100, I don't know, schools or whatever. That's huge, man.
So 34 schools. We have around 16,000 students. I'm very fortunate to have a central office team that I work directly with, and our office was created under the vision of our superintendent. For especially in urban education, he's a longtime superintendent, Marty Polio. This is his 8th year. This office was kind of his vision. So, 34 schools is a lot. But if you're a member of cabinet, doesn't matter if you're in charge of communications or tech or HR, everyone has a stake in the accelerated improvement schools and making sure that they have the resources and support that they need. So 34 schools is a lot, but we have a great team that I work directly with, and then our broader cabinet, making sure our schools get the resources they need and deserve.
Nate M and Nate P.
Yes.
For both of you, because you can go to school and we get educated in leadership, but I don't think that really prepares you well for the challenges of the roles, especially the roles you're in. So start with Nate M. How did you know how to be effective in your position as an associate superintendent? And then Provincio, you're next.
Well, I would say, just like in any job, there's a growth curve of trying to figure out the lay of the land. And I remember when I was a teacher and I moved into being an assistant principal, and it was, this is what happens in all these other classrooms. And when I moved to central office and I started working in our schools, it was very much that same revelation of, this is how the other schools work. I think about the Mike Matos quote quite a bit in our work, and Mike says something about a journey doesn't begin with a single step. The journey begins with facing the right direction. And so much of what we begin with and was just getting our schools to face the right direction. Obviously, moving and being a part of a professional learning community is part of it. But that transfer process for principals, especially learning the job, is the understanding of how organizational management works, how organizations should function as systems, and then those systems need to be monitored, have a continuous improvement process, have a results orientation. So there's a lot of those organizational management. Are you really organized for improvement? That isn't really necessarily taught, or not taught explicitly enough in our ed leadership courses. So I see that as a big struggle. So when I was onboarding into this job, that's one of the things I immediately saw, and it's something that we continue to work with our schools, regardless of how long we've had them in our office.
One of the big things that I see, and this happens across the United States, is that schools that have yet to launch, right, that are right there on the cusp, it's not so much about like more resources. I think it's about empowerment. I see so many teachers that have gone, that are just kind of like almost operating as substitutes. They feel like they've lost control of any autonomy. and so curriculum has been purchased, and so we got to use the curriculum with fidelity. Internet resources have been purchased, so then we've got to subsidize how we do our RTI to kind of utilize this program, and then it's like all this management of programs that sometimes I've seen this have kind of just like, well, all my professionalism has been subsidized. And getting back to essential standards, and say it so much, like I think there was a Common Core K5. There's 400 standards that Common Core has presented just in K5, something like 206.8, and I don't know. That's so many standards, and so we feel like we're already overwhelmed before we start. So we have to use these programs and use these resources with fidelity, and then we forget the gifts that our teachers and our teams actually have to only get really, really good with a few things and get traction with a few things and feel empowered and engaged with a few things, and principals taking kind of like shifting their day-to-day time from dealing with the urgent to dealing with the necessary, and just empowering small wins and feeling and having some ownership over that. For me, Nate, that's what's helped schools grow. It's not instantaneous, but it gets a foot in the door of feeling accomplishment and having that kind of ongoing process. And I think it's a game of patience, because you're dealing with not only school issues but community issues that are tremendous. But those small wins multiply over time. And that's usually where I've seen schools grow the most, is that they literally start small, get some wins, and that's where improvement starts to happen.
Yeah, and I think about when working with our schools, I say all the time that all of the answers are in this room.
Yeah,
and I think sometimes as central office, I really appreciate what you said. We have to look in the mirror of are we empowering our principals to lead? Are we taking it away from them by all the purchases that we make? And when you said that, part of what's in the definition of being a professional learning community is around collective inquiry and action research.
Yes, absolutely.
And we say all the time. So I love what you said. The 2 or 3 things we want to get traction in. All right. Are we really looking at it through that collective inquiry and action research model where we're going to decide to be great at this? One of the things I see in my tenure of working with low performing schools that serve a high need population is many of our teachers and leadership team members, this is all we know.
That's all we know.
And so we get normed to sometimes lower expectations.
Mm-hmm.
And we have we taught in nothing but a dysfunctional system, and then we became an assistant principal in a school that was maybe dysfunctional, and now I'm principal. So now I actually don't know what great looks like in my setting, but we expect our principals to be great. So you're right. I think empowering our leaders, figuring out the 2 or 3 things that we're going to have great traction in, and then deciding to be great at those and sharing what that vision is, and then providing real examples to your leadership team, your staff, your parents, community is so central for student outcomes to shift.
Yeah, totally. Totally agree.
Nate, you were a high school principal before your current position, correct?
Yes.
So bless you for that. I don't know about Provencio, but for me, the high school world was kind of terrifying a little bit. So I was a K-8, a middle school principal, and elementary before that. But the high school world seemed daunting because the stakes are so high at high school that students' lives, it's immense. So thank you for your service as a high school principal. What did you do to help your school succeed? And how did you go about impacting change? Because I know impacting change at any level is a challenge, but I think it's especially challenging, or can be, at the high school level.
Yeah.
So one of the things, and when you're looking in, whether it's elementary or high, but we did where I was principal is a Title I school, and I inherited a school where I was an assistant principal and became principal back in the day when schools were identified as persistently low achieving or then priority schools. But really just a simple exercise of if we could put up any student picture in yearbook picture, we put it in the front of our administrative team. And we would say, how can we ensure we are the best school in our district for this student? And we would have our social worker there that's part of our schools, our assistant principals, counselors, teachers. And part of it was like, okay, so for this student with this set of needs, how are we ensuring that they are actually getting what they need? And that was part of our revelation of a PLC is far more than just our teachers meeting together on Tuesday, but our school has to function like a professional learning community. So yes, we have teacher teams, but we have support service teams. We have this admin team, and we have a mission and vision, values and goals that all become interconnected. So that was certainly part of that work of just saying, whether we're looking at the RTI pyramid or looking at the structure of how we are setting up our collaborative teams, but a true commitment of how are we going to ensure that we're going to be that great place for all kids. And then it was working to get, and we could talk about some of the teacher collaborative teamwork that we did, but for our security team, they were their own collaborative team. My counselors, they were their own collaborative team. So this commitment of we all think and function like a professional learning community if we're going to reach our mission statement. And then I'll go back to something that Nathaniel said. We talked about you have to have traction in 2 or 3 things. Well, we really decided we would have traction in one thing, and that was, what would it mean for us to be the best model in our district at doing PLC work correctly? And then once we felt like we were there, it would be like, okay, what can we do to be the best PLC version in our region? And then eventually to that national model. We felt like if we could do this one high leverage thing exceptionally well, our teacher professional capacity would improve, and then our teacher capacity would improve, and then our student achievement would improve along with it. So we made that commitment together with our staff. But you're right, in the high school, there's so many things that can distract you beyond post-secondary readiness rates, graduation rates, all the different departments, but we really focused back in on our goals that tied our work at the school.
How long did that journey take until you felt like you were where you wanted to be?
Probably in 2000. I'll just say this: in 2010, when I was an assistant principal, we had a great principal there with us at Fern Creek, Houston Barber, is when our PLC journey began. And then it was about 6 years later where we exited priority status and became a proficient school in the state of Kentucky. At that time, we were the first urban school to go from priority to proficiency. And then the following year, being able to win the DeFore Award. But I would say it probably took us 3 years of really introducing it to our staff to really start moving towards model practices. But one of the things we realized is as a persistently low achieving school, we got this school improvement grant money from the feds, and we have to spend it on this and that and whatever. But after a few years, that money is gone. Yeah. So what did you do with it? And what we realized is what stayed was our commitment to doing PLC work right. And you can do it. You can do it for free. You don't need to do anything with it with your contract. And so it's a fully sustainable process. And so the money came and went, but our commitment to be a strong PLC remained.
Man,
I think it's important just to note that change does take time. But congratulations on that immense success. That is fantastic. That is not easy work. So
no,
we
not at the high school level. So Nate, I'm always I work with high schools, and they're usually very large.
Mhm.
Some of the roadblocks or some of the little things that I have to navigate when I'm working with high schools is especially as they're growing to be professional learning communities is you have a department, and in that department you might have the one biology teacher, one chemistry teacher, or one I
the
don't know
science.
what the sciences, right?
Right.
You might have a ninth grade algebra team. You might have um, and then let's say they have, and then a lot of they'll have their prep times, and then they take their prep times, and you want to have that collaborative aspect. Um, what were some of the what were some of the pragmatic lessons you learned with helping these departments be true collaborative teams? Working under that umbrella of becoming a professional learning community, because there are some logistical challenges I think that happens with departments and these types of aspects that are unique to high schools. I'm just curious, Nate, your perspective and lessons learned on that.
So we took Rick DeFore's words to heart that common content teams are the gold standard.
Yeah.
And so one of the things, whether I'm working with our schools here in Louisville or what I did was principal was I'm setting the structure for the gold standard. And so when it comes to our master schedule, teacher preps, what classes teachers teach, as much as we can, we're going to have our chemistry teachers together. We're going to have our biology teachers together. We'll have our physics teachers together, so on and so forth. And that we talked about this being designed for success. And not that there's not other successful models, because every high school is going to have singletons, or where you have department teams, or you have these groups of teams that may not mesh completely in terms of content, maybe even outside their department. But first is, where are you designed to try to do common content first? And so that's what we attempted to do. The second thing that we did is if we put a teacher or a set of teachers together, we really went through that exercise of, is this a group, or can this be an interdependent team?
Mm.
If we ever felt like, hey, this is just going to be a group of people, we said, okay, we're not ready for that. So we made sure that when we were putting those non-common content together, that we could see them functioning and working as an interdependent team. So they were part of a department, how they align their standards vertically, what are the enduring skills that they want kids to know, how will they be able to line assessments as you're looking at rubrics or proficiency scales. How can we line those up 9, 10, 11, 12, so we can have critical conversations about it and share some of those problems of practice. But a lot of it is being relentless. So one of the things that I believe is so important in your role as principal or role as an assistant superintendent is the connections between your belief and your collective commitments. So you can't say, well, we believe our teachers should collaborate. Oh, we've read Learning by Doing. Yeah, we believe it. And then your adult behaviors don't match.
Oh, wow. Yeah.
So, and that's the role of the principal and the leadership team, and to help instill that within the organization. So that was our way. Once we decided we're going to be a model at this, then that means our security team has to do it.
That's right.
And our one teacher that teach calculus 1 period a day, they're either helping that trigonometry class, or we're linking them with a calculus teacher in another school, but they're going to have a critical friend, or they're going to be a part of a team for their own benefit and the benefit of someone else.
I remember working with a CTE team in a high school one time. It was like, man, they were the most intimidating group of gentlemen I've ever been around. It was like this carpenter who had like 2 fingers. God bless him. There was an auto mechanic guy. I mean, and it was like a carpenter, auto mechanic, a plumber. I mean, you name it. These great guys, but like really intimidating. And so I have to sit over there and I've got to like meet with them about how they can become like a collaborative team. And they're like, well, what are we going to plan over? And they're talking to me and like, who's this fancy pants guy coming over here and telling us how to do our stuff? And I say, listen, gentlemen, listen, you've all got standards, right? There's plumbing standards, there's carpentry
Right.
standards, there's you got standards. You share students, like you all share some of these same kids. And then like your strategies, I know that there are ways that you guys can have share some strategies on this. And after about an hour, they finally were able to look at me and said, you know what? You're right. We may all have different things that we do, but we can start to just have these types of conversations to align our practice. And I said, you know what? I said, what is your goal? Like, what do your kids struggle with? And they said, well, listen, our kids are great carpenters. Our kids are great plumbers. Our kids are great welders, but they can't interview for a job. They have no skills. I was like, great. That's what we're going to work on. So it doesn't matter what they teach or what you teach or like your different types of things that you've got going on. Let's have that, collective inquiry and action research on how a student can comport themselves through this vocation when they're writing a resume or when they're interviewing. So that's something that we can align themselves with. Man, it was like the best conversation, but little challenging though, little challenging. How did you deal similarly with like your CTE department and some of those other singletons? You mentioned it, but any further insights on that?
So we really began with what do we have in common and what goals can we share together. And I think what your example is a great one. Sometimes it's not really intuitive of what do we share, but through a little bit of digging, you see commonalities. A lot of times that they're I think as you're talking about interview skills, that's obviously really important. There's certainly literacy skills of reading, writing, and speaking. And one thing with CTE teachers, even if they're investigating and doing collective inquiry, as they're building, about really being reflective on their own practices, about how do we better engage students because they didn't go through student teaching, they may be struggling. So even if they're focusing in on some process outcomes in their own classroom, that's okay. It's just building that momentum and just the understanding of, hey, if you're part of this school, this is part of the culture. This is how we grow as professionals as well as grow our students.
Yeah, awesome.
I do want to say one more thing
man.
Because there's so many wonderful resources about the singletons and the one-offs. But John Yost and Brig Lane, their book that they released a couple of years ago on singletons is just a go-to.
Yeah.
I bought a copy for all my schools here in Louisville. It's something that I continually go back to, that when they're having questions of, okay, I have these two that don't meet. And then I say, well, they have this critical friend protocol. This maybe in terms of the on-ramp, the last one you want to do, but if you want to function, here it is. And there's tools and examples from Brig and John on how to do that work. So that's been a common reference point now for me in the last few years for those teams that may be a little bit more difficult to start with.
Yeah, we've had Brig on our show, and he's outstanding. Yeah.
What's the name of that book?
Singletons.
It's called Singletons.
Yeah, Singletons. Nate, as a leader in a high school, you can't be at all places at all times, right? I mean, maybe you could. I mean, you're pretty magical, Nate. But like, how do you? A colleague of mine once said, "If it's not inspected, it's not respected." So you can cast a vision and you can say we're going to be becoming a professional learning community, but sometimes there's got to be a little bit of an inspection process, a little bit of an accountability process. It's kind of my last question for you. is you got so many teams. Obviously, you got your APs and your department heads. How do you? It's not that you have to hold people accountable, because we want people to hold themselves accountable, but you've still got a job to do as the purveyor, kind of like, the overseer of a PLC culture. What was your day to day like with facilitating that process?
So first of all, I want to say this. When someone becomes a principal, there's all sorts of variables when they inherit the job. And I was an assistant principal in the school where I became principal, so that transition became a little bit easier. And then the second of my leadership team that I inherited, I would put them in front of any leadership team in the United States. They're just so many outstanding people. The great principal that Fern Creek has now, Rebecca Nicholas, deeply embedded in the PLC process. She was an assistant principal with me. Michelle Marilla, who is an outstanding coach. So and again, just want to give credit to our previous principal, Houston Barber. But I had an outstanding leadership team.
Yeah.
And so when I say here, I understand that I came with great advantages, and those two and just my leadership team in general provided so much support. But I want to get to it because it's so important. John Wooden has the quote, "It's not what you coach, it's what you emphasize." And part of what we learned in our journey was this: if our collaborative teams were going to meet every week, then we had to meet every week to discuss how they were doing. And so we set aside a time. It ended up being on Thursday afternoon after school. Every Thursday afternoon, we talked about our collaborative teams. We would go through a protocol of what collaborative teams we would want to discuss. We would look at their products and evidence, how they're doing in the work. How are we ensuring they're completing PLC cycles? As a high needs school, we spent a lot of time of keeping score of CFAs, common formative assessments, data analysis protocols, and how we're doing critical question 3. How are we going to handle when students struggle? We wanted to see evidence of that in our collaborative team time, and then evidence when we're doing learning walks in the classroom. And we felt like, to honor our teachers that are meeting weekly, we had to meet weekly, all of our assistant principals and our coach in doing that role. And then I'll say this. So Michelle Marilla, who was our instructional coach at the time, all of our collaborative teams met on Tuesday afternoon. At the next day on Wednesday morning, she was in the office at 5:30 in the morning, reviewing the work of every collaborative team.
Wow.
And there was a time where, or at the end of each collaborative team, teachers could put what support they need, what questions that she had, and if they had a question, she wanted to make sure it was answered and responded to the day after the collaborative team. So part of this was, if we expect our teachers to be model examples, we have to be model examples as a leadership team. So that affected our behavior. You cannot be good at this if it is the 8th thing on your plate.
Yeah.
I really, one of the analogies I say is, becoming a PLC is not adding something to your plate. It is the plate.
It's the plate, baby.
It's what you do and how you operate, and come hell or high water, that's what you decide to be great at. It goes back to what you said. What are you deciding to have traction in? That is that high leverage. What are you? And so that was part of the work. So just beyond the principal, you have to have a core team that decides to be great at it. And then obviously you're training your teacher facilitators and empowering them to be great. So what is your scope and sequence and planning, and how are they showcasing their work to each other, was all part of our method to become a model PLC school.
Not only a model, but the highest performing professional learning community on earth for that year.
Wow.
I mean, that's pretty great, man.
Nate, I appreciate you calling out your team, because I know I wouldn't have the success I had without a great team around me. So I just appreciate that. I always look for that quality in successful leaders. It takes a team.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
So Nate, last couple of questions. One comment, last couple of questions. Outside of New Orleans, or as they say in New Orleans, Nolans, Louisville very well may be my second favorite city in America. Louisville.
Well,
I know there's outstanding beverages all over the place. What
absolutely.
is your go-to restaurant?
Oh my gosh. Well, again, if this could be a little infomercial, Louisville, Kentucky is great. Yes, you talk about New Orleans. Louisville is a highly social city. And so people here like to go out to eat. People like to have a good time. Bourbon is, of course, ubiquitous with our culture.
Yeah.
We tell schools all the time, you're good at what you value. We look at it, and in Louisville, we're good at bourbon. We're good at horse racing, because we value it. We spend our time and resources on it. We have so many outstanding restaurants. But my favorite is there's a Cuban Spanish tapas restaurant. It's just in a strip mall, but my wife and I love it. It's called Mojitos.
Okay.
And that is that
Eric, we've been there.
You've been to Mojitos?
Eric, that's where we had dinner when we came in. It's outside of Louisville a little bit, right?
Yeah. It's in Louisville, but it's
yes, we sure did.
Suburban Louisville. We'll put it that way. And if you need a great steak, Jeff Ruby's downtown Louisville is as good of a steak as what you're going to get anywhere in the United States.
That's fantastic. I got to get back. I got to get back to Louisville, man. I got to get back. Nate, listen, man, you are the real deal, man. You're a dog. I love it. I love that you have not shied away from the mission of making sure that, every school is operating at high levels. I know it's hard work, man, as a former associate superintendent. I know there's so many things that get on your plate, and being able for you to find some time to share your story and share your testimony.
Thank you.
Eric and I really appreciate it, man. Well done. Can't wait to get to Louisville.